All right, welcome everyone. Good morning. My name is Deb Carr, and I'm co-chair of today's event, along with artist Leslie Baum, author Michael Bonesteel, and Scott Hunter of the University of Chicago. Thank you for joining us both in person and online for the third of our 3 symposium series, Artists First Conversations, held in conjunction with the exhibition Artists First, 25 years of studio art at Thresholds, currently on display downstairs in the Michigan Avenue Galleries on the first floor east side. If you're here in person, I hope that you'll be able to check that out. If you're not, come on down whenever you can. This event would not be possible without the support of Kyoko Lerner and the Nathan and Kyoko Lerner Foundation, along with additional support from my organization, Intuit, the Center for Intuitive and Outsider Art, and its 2022 grant funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. Our thanks also go to our partners, the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, and Thresholds. Our panelists will be addressing questions from both the in-house and the online audience towards the end of the session. Please feel free to write down your questions on the cards being passed along, or submit your online questions via the chat function or the Q&A function on Zoom. I'm thrilled to death today to present our moderator, Faheem Majeed. Faheem is an artist, educator, curator, and community facilitator. He blends his unique experience as an artist, nonprofit administrator, and curator to create works that focus on institutional critique and exhibitions that leverage collaboration to engage his immediate and the broader community in meaningful dialogue. As part of his studio practice, he transforms materials such as particle board, scrap metal and wood, discarded signs, and billboard remnants, breathing new life into these often overlooked and devalued materials. As its former executive director, Chicago's Southside Community Arts Center serves as Majeed's primary muse. Faheem also serves as co-director and founder of the Floating Museum, which is an arts collective and nonprofit that creates new models to explore relationships between art, community, architecture, and public institutions like museums. Using site-responsive art design and programming, the Floating Museum explores the potential in these relationships by considering the infrastructure, history, and aesthetics of a space. He is currently an assistant professor of art at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Welcome, Faheem. I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. Wow. I have to abridge that bio. That's a little long. Thank you.
I did abridge it. It was longer than that. It was longer. I made it shorter.
Hi, everyone. Hello, fellow panelists and friends. I just want to set the tone a little bit. These things can be very formal and a little, intimidating. And I just want to know that the majority of us know each other in the room in some capacity, a lot of familiar faces and online. So I would like to create a space of comfort and warmness, in that I fumble a lot when I speak. And if I make a mistake, call me. I always tell my friends, if I put my foot in my mouth, please, if you're my friend, tell me to take my foot out my mouth. So I want to create a space where we can have a conversation, a dialogue, and mutual respect, and as well. So thank y'all for being here with me on this day. We're going to jump right in some ways with the panelists, and I'm thinking what I will do is also read your bios as you present. And I think we're going to do about 5 to 10 minutes to get a little bit of context and background to who's on stage. And we'll start with Leslie. But before, if I have to sit here and be cringeworthy, you have to sit here and be cringeworthy too. Leslie Baum is Baum. Baum. That's right, I said that right. Is a Chicago-based painter whose work is invitational in nature. Her painting practice is informed by her 25 years as a museum educator at the Art Institute of Chicago. She initiated the Open Studio at Threshold South in 1997 and has been running it ever since. Baum received her BA from the University of Vermont and studied abroad at Glasgow School of Art. She has exhibited nationally and internationally with exhibitions in New York, San Francisco, Portland, Mexico City, Rome, South Korea. Her drawings and paintings are in permanent collections of the Chicago Art Institute and Elmhurst Art Museum. Her work has been reviewed extensively, including in Art Forum, Art in America, Hyperallergic, and Chicago Tribune. She has received residencies at the Watershed Center of Ceramic Arts, the Nido Project in Monte Cristo de Vibo. I said that wrong.
That's all right. Monte Vibio?
Vibio, okay. In Italy, and Yado, yeah, okay. At the Vermont Studio Center in 2020, a 2020 DCASE grant funded by the Plein Air Archive. You should check that out at pleinairarchive.com, a site documenting her ongoing painting and social practices. Everyone, can we give Leslie a hand as she presents?
And then just click here.
Yeah, one sec.
Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. I wanted to start with this first image because it is the reason why we're all gathered together. The Artist First exhibition downstairs in the Michigan Avenue Galleries is the culmination of 25 years of studio art at Thresholds, and a project very close to my heart and the heart of Kyoko Lerner, who invited me to do this meaningful life's work in September of 1997. So I've been at it for some time. And just as by way of introduction, Kyoko invited me to establish the studio, which was originally at Thresholds North, as well as at Thresholds South. Now we're only at the South location. And we were looking towards the model of the studios in the Bay Area, Creative Growth Center and Creativity Explored, which is not an art therapy model, it's an artist mentor model. And so my role is primarily as an artist mentor, and so I'm primarily nurturing the artistic growth and practices of the folks I work with. But I do that through role modeling as well as supporting my own artistic practice, and that includes the public-facing work of exhibiting. So even though my primary work is supporting the artists in the studio, when I can, I try to exhibit and have the artists have their work in public spaces of all kinds. So this picture is from 1998. It's the first show I organized at the long-defunct Gallery 312 in the West Loop, featuring the artwork of artists I work with both at Thresholds South and at Thresholds North. And I'm just going to kind of quickly go through images that are primarily of exhibitions that we have participated in over the years, and some of the artists, and kind of in thinking about the kind of larger question of today's symposium, how artists with disabilities fit into the greater art world. My emphasis is more on our participation in public-facing events, as the art world is really a social space beyond the studio practice. So those of you who were lucky enough to be at the first talk got to hear Kenny Williams. This is a much younger Kenny Williams. Some of our first shows, I think this might be from 2000, it could be 1999. Some of our first shows were at the State of Illinois building. They were NAMI events in the lobby. And we have shown in all kinds of spaces. Like any self-respecting artist, we will say yes to almost anything as long as there's a public. So this is a great example of really interfacing at a non-traditional art venue. We have been very privileged over the years to exhibit in some more traditional art world spaces. For over a decade, I would say, there were annual exhibitions at the Judy Saslow Gallery, where she curated together many of the progressive studios in Chicago. And I dug out some show cards. Thinking Out Loud is one, and then The Mind's Eye, I'm gonna, Rob, did you curate that show? Just gonna call you out, is that you? Yeah, so there's also a show card for an exhibition organized by Project Onward when they were situated right here in the Cultural Center. So we've got two show cards here. And this is a really beautiful exhibition photo of one of the shows put together at the Judy Saslow Gallery, one of these annual exhibitions. And you might see that it says the Nathan and Kyoko Lerner Foundation. Although we are centered at Thresholds, the initial funding grant that supported us is from the Nathan and Kyoko Lerner Foundation. And for all the exhibitions that happened at the Judy Saslow Gallery, that is how we were identified. And you can see a wonderful survey of some of the artists' work here. I love this picture so much, also much more youthful, because we've been at this for 25 years. This is Robert Bell and Krishan Williams at an opening. And again, how artists fit in the art world. I mean, part of the art world is the social gathering. So I thought it was really important to have some images that show folks doing what you do at an opening, visiting, talking, if you're lucky enough to have a buffet, snacking. One of the shows that I organized independently, I think this was in 2012, was also at another defunct space in Ukrainian Village. It's called the Country Club. And this was completely independent. Friends of mine ran the space, and I proposed an exhibition and put it together. It's a storefront on Damon Avenue. I have to say it was a very beautiful show. And again, a picture at the opening, Krishan talking about his art with guests who came to view the work. The big event at Thresholds, this is really our kind of gold star moment, is every September. Same time as Art Expo, but this is really where it's at as far as Thresholds artists are concerned, is the Ravenswood Art Walk. One of our important administrative buildings is on Ravenswood in the stretch of space where the Art Walk happens. This is a very well-loved neighborhood festival that is very well attended, and we convert our industrial storage garage space in the back of 4101 into a gallery exhibiting works of artists all across Thresholds, which includes Kankakee, the Dinson Center, Threshold South, and artists working independently. I love this space because it is not a white cube. Again, back to the larger question of the art world and the venues in which we exhibit. There's like a realness, I think, to the space that really showcases the work in a meaningful way. And often the artists come and stay and interact with the public. And this is not only a fun time, but it's a time of many sales, which is also very important to artists in the art world. So here we have Robert Bell with his amazing drawings and paintings, primarily of rock bands, but we also have a President Obama portrait in the mix. This is a really great exhibition organized by myself and the Chicago artist Stan Schellenbarger when he worked at New Wave Cafe, a coffee shop, also defunct, maybe, is it still there? In Logan Square. And at the opening, Kenny, Krishan, and Katara and their work. This exhibition, I believe, is from 2013 or 14. It is at Lula, a restaurant in Logan Square. It's a solo presentation of Katara Maller's artwork. We got an invitation from the then curator, Marianne Fairbanks, to show the work. It was a beautiful show. And why this one is so important to me and was like a real turning point for me in my thinking about the various venues that the artists who I support exhibit in is Marianne also asked me to exhibit my work. So at the same time, I had a solo presentation in the dining room, and Katara had a solo presentation in the bar. And here we were artists on equal footing, sharing the same experience, the same audience, and the same opening. And though this should be a given, it wasn't. And so it was a real epiphany for me after these many years to be like, we are all in this together. We are all in this very same art world, sharing space and sharing experiences. And which brings us to the moment at hand, the artist's first exhibition downstairs in the Cultural Center, which culminates these 25 years of working with artists and supporting them and exhibiting while we can. And just as a kind of context, in the very same space, the exhibition before was my work. So again, the artists and I are in the same space. We are in the same art world. We are taken seriously in the same way, which I think is extremely valuable and kind of worth reflecting on. I just want to bring up a few more shows that happened in the context of the pandemic, which weirdly ended up being very meaningful for the artists who I work with, because I started an Instagram account dedicated to their work at TBS Artists, and that was able to bring their work to the attention of a lot of art world insiders who had not seen it before. And Chancellor Maxwell, artist who I work with, was given a solo show at a gallery in California. It was virtual because people weren't going in the gallery at the time, but it was very well received and very beautiful. And then Chancellor was invited to participate at a show at the Arts Club in Chicago, curated by Janelle Malif. And these two pictures are two different shows of Chancellor's that were concurrent. And that is Chancellor with his work in the Arts Club. And I do believe that is my last image. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Leslie. That was great. I know I sent y'all questions prior, but as you talk, I have more questions. So we'll work through that. But we're going to keep working our way down the list. Let's see, who do we have? Robyn Jablonski. Robyn Jablonski is a mixed media collage artist. Her love for neurodiverse community began with becoming an early education instructor and an applied behavioral analyst under the supervision of Ann Maxwell, a renowned behavioral psychologist, where she worked in the field of early intervention with children diagnosed with autism, global apraxia, and other developmental challenges. Robyn pursued her art making with mixed media and studying art therapeutically at the School of the Art Institute from 2008 to 2011. She then interned at Project Onward starting in June 2011 and stayed on as a studio facilitator to help transition the artists in the program to a new location on the south side of Chicago from the Cultural Center, where they are now located. So everyone's been there. It's dope. Over the years, as the program grew and changed, her roles have evolved from facilitator to studio manager, and as of 2021, settled into her current position as Project Onward's creative director. Robyn works and lives happily in the South Side community of Bridgeport with her daughter and 2 cats. Robyn.
Thanks, Deb. Hi, everyone. Most of you in here know me already. I've worked with you guys in different capacities through my life, actually. 3 of my mentors are here right now, one from high school, one from SAIC, and one from Project Onward as well. So starting with this image, this is one of the artists that we work with at Project Onward. This is George Zuniga's Windy City Kitty, which became our mascot for a number of reasons. A lot of the artists at Project Onward are very enamored with animals and pop culture, and George is one of the core artists, and he's really one of the reasons why the program began in the first place, along with another artist, Fernando Ramirez, who's downstairs right now and will be till 2 o'clock today, working on another project. So Project Onward is, as most of you know, a studio and gallery for artists who have either developmental disabilities or mental illness. And it started at the Cultural Center here, actually. So this weekend has been interesting. I've been here pretty much the whole weekend. It started with an after-school program, After School Matters, where one of our co-founders, Rob, who's here today, and another instructor, Mark Jackson, started the program with artists aging out of high school. And at the time, there weren't that many facilities for artists who had developmental disabilities and mental illness to go to as far as counseling in the colleges. So Rob and Mark began working with Lois Weisberg, if I'm correct, and Colleen Sims to start Project Onward at the Cultural Center. They started with a core group of about 10 artists, and most of those artists are still with us to this day. And it just over time, it grew and flourished to become usually our numbers lie at like between 50 and 60 artists. Let's see here. So that's our mission. And then this is our current studio. So, so in 2013, I was an intern, and then Rob hired me on to be a facilitator and help transition the artists over to the Bridgeport Art Center, which was quite an experience. Most of our artists really adjusted quite well. We did have a few artists that left because it was a little bit much for them, but mostly the artists, and with COVID too, you would think that they would be having more struggles, and they do have struggles, but the way that they have coped has been really remarkable. So this is our studio in Bridgeport, and we do a lot of events there. Mainly we do the third Friday opening event. It's a studio walk in Bridgeport, and that's where we get most of our sales from there. Let's see. Why is it not moving? Sorry, guys. There we go. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about the artist that we have with us, Cherylle. Cherylle is one of our panelists today. We've had her with us since about 2018, am I right? She's also a Thresholds artist, so she's worked with Kathy Osler, who's here today as well. And Kathy graciously brought Cherylle with us to Project Onward to work with us, and we didn't really have much facilities to do clay work. There is the Chicago Ceramic Center upstairs from us at the Bridgeport Art Center. However, we were able to kind of slowly be able to work with them to let Cherylle use their kiln, which is a really nice kiln. And so in just this year, we were given the go to start our own ceramics studio upstairs on the 5th floor at the Art Center. And Cherylle is our star artist. We're there, so we were building right around her. It was a grant from the Virginia Groot Foundation, so we're really excited about that right now. And here's Cherylle at work, working on her dragon vase. This was at the studio. It wasn't in Sheboygan, right? Okay, so we did a residency in Sheboygan this summer, and Cherylle was able to see the facilities at the Kohler Art Center and at the Kohler Foundry, so she was really lucky to do that. I think it really enhanced her work a lot. So I think she's making her dragon vase right there. Here's some examples of Cherylle's work. She'll tell you a little bit more probably about her work, but it stems a lot from mythology and strong women throughout time, and what they kind of inspiration they can bring her and everyone around her, if that's accurate. I don't want to put words in your mouth. And then also she does these really incredible masks that she started off with working with Kathy over the years, and she had an affinity for them, and she kind of, I don't know, she just made them, they're really unique, and she really flourished with them over time. Here's some animal masks. This is the vase that she was working on. it's really cool because she used like a kind of a sparkly glaze in there that, you know, you can pick it up a little bit, but in person it's really beautiful. And then this is John Banky, who, oops, sorry, I went back a little bit. John Banky, who is one of our painters and has been here since the Cultural Center, but recently has wanted to try ceramics. And we brought him to Sheboygan, and he worked with a friend of mine who's the instructor there. And he just picked it up super fast. So a lot of artists who you don't know can work in multimedia. Sometimes they just can pick it up really fast. So I think that's a lesson for everyone, is that we shouldn't just expect those artists to do one thing, which surprisingly I have seen people over the years. But so John will be downstairs on the 23rd and 24th here in the art lab, and he'll show his mixed media process. And then these right here are these flowers that he was inspired by at the not the Cultural Center, excuse me, in Sheboygan when we went to the Art Preserve. So we got to do a residency where we took 10 artists to Sheboygan, and we got to take them to the Kohler Arts and tour. So he was really inspired by the von Bruchenstein exhibit and the wildflowers outside of the Art Preserve. So I'm pretty proud of him for this. It's a pretty interesting bouquet of flowers. Whoops, sorry. And then here we have some other artists who dabble a little bit in ceramics as well. I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because it's really an exciting moment for us to have this different media right now and have this center, because it's been a big deal for us. So Sandruik, who normally works in foil, has been playing around with ceramics as well, and Ricky, who normally does cardboard sculptures, and he kind of actually already sculpts the paper around him. So yeah, so it's been, you know, we like to talk about the process at Project Onward, and our job as facilitators there is to guide the artists, but not fully, you know, we're not teaching them. Like one of our artists says, George says, "You're gonna teach me art?" And we say, "No, we're gonna help you make art, George." So, you know, we want to just kind of help them in a manner that we can take our artists out into the world further and show that they are just as professional as anyone in the contemporary art world right now. And that's kind of my job. And Project Onward is great. And I think we're really all, in my life and in some of our other lives here, lucky to have it and lucky to know those artists. That's it. Thank you.
That was great, Robyn. And it's nice I was like, Ricky's making cows now? Are you making cows? Oh, well, there it is. You know, it's like instead of buildings.
Yeah, we went to Wisconsin and we took all of our artists to the Art Preserve and to the Kohler Arts Center this summer. And Ricky, you know, picks up everything on the way, and he's constantly, he's obsessed with the Milwaukee courthouse right now.
So we haven't left the buildings. Yeah.
So cows, barns, that kind of thing.
And my floating museum has worked with Project Onward extensively. Try to include one or two artists on each of the projects in some capacity. So it's nice to see. It's been a long time. Feels long. COVID wasn't great, but yeah, it's nice to be reconnecting. Okay, let's keep it moving. Oh, here we go. I got things. Cherylle, I'm gonna do your big introduction here. Cherylle Booker is a ceramic artist and painter Booker takes inspiration from her personal and emotional life, as well as Greek mythology. Combining these vast and expansive ideas and emotions, Booker translates these ideas into her pieces to create a discussion around universally shared experiences. Booker describes her work as a therapeutic process. She states emotions and memories are something that comes into play. Sometimes I am just working things out. If I'm feeling a certain emotion, to take the clay or the painting to personify that, it helps me process those emotions to allow other people to have a glimpse into how those things feel to me and maybe other people who are in other situations. Booker also discusses her emotional experience in being a neurodivergent person with her elaborate ceramic mask pieces. Cherylle is now open to commissions. She lives in Chicago's Forest Park neighborhood, and she has been at Project Onward since 2018. Cherylle, can you please come on up? And this is our one artist, so this is a real treat. Getting to the artist's mind.
Hello. I think that being an artist with a disability and being an artist in general, you are constantly given the message that what you're doing is not worthwhile. I've been told many times that I should go get a job at a factory. So conversations like this and organizations like Thresholds and Project Onward are really important to people like me. I started doing ceramics for the first time in grade school. I had a teacher that was straight out of college, and she somehow talked my school into building a kiln room and buying her all this clay. And she allowed me to explore that. Outside of class, she would stay after with me for hours while I just played with the clay and tried to see what I could do. After this experience, I wasn't able to create any ceramic art for maybe close to 20 years. So my first experience with Thresholds and later with Project Onward, this was my only chance to even try, you know. And that's really important to me, because being disabled and being on a fixed income, it's really difficult to afford the day-to-day, let alone affording clay and a kiln, firing services, and things of that nature. So having the opportunity to just create art and have people that are behind me and believe in my work has been life-changing. My work, I usually either am inspired by mythology, by current events, and by my own emotions and experiences, or the experiences of people that I'm close to. I work through my emotions and work through the challenges that I have with having a mental illness, being neurodivergent, through my art. And I feel like if I can be open about these things, because our society tells us to hide the ugly stuff or the uncomfortable stuff. And I think that being able to explore that in my work, being able to share that with people has helped me, and I feel like it could help someone else. I think that also being an artist with a disability, it means being very stubborn. And it means being sort of a visionary. You have to be able to see yourself in these settings and see yourself fitting into these things when no one around you believes that you can, until you find your tribe of people who believe in you. Being at Project Onward allowed me to explore my feelings about the pandemic in ways that really helped me process that, because I'm sure that was a really depressing time for everyone. And, you know, like exploring the fears that we had of COVID and not really knowing what the situation was, that uncertainty. I feel that a lot with having the issues that I have. So being able to share that with other people when they may have been experiencing that for the first time was really meaningful for me. And also having thresholds, having Project Onward really allowed me to flourish in my artwork. I'm not worried about being judged. I'm not worried about sales. I'm just focused on creating my artwork. Having people like Kathy, Robyn, Whitney, some of the other people who work at Project Onward, just having someone to tell you, hey, we have your back. Having people that are there when you're having a bad day, when it's difficult to talk to people at an event, you know, people that's like, hey, it's okay. You know, we have your back and we're going to help you out. It makes a huge difference than, you know, just doing these things alone. And I am very grateful to be able to be here and to be able to share my experience, share my artwork, and, you know, talk about Project Onward, talk about thresholds, because I think, you know, more people should know about this. And more people with disabilities should know that these kinds of programs are open to them, because Project Onward has been open since a few years after I graduated from high school. And it took me all these years to find thresholds, to find Project Onward, because you know, I just didn't know what resources were available. And just having that, like, someone to tell you, hey, Kathy, like Kathy did with me, hey, Project Onward exists, and I think maybe you should apply. I think maybe this would be a good idea for you, and supporting you through that. I had nowhere to store my artwork while I built up the pieces that I wanted to bring to Project Onward to show them, and Kathy and Thresholds helped me do that. You know, I had no way to buy clay or buy paint to get firing services. And Project Onward opened that up for me. And I think that beforehand, you know, it was just a lot of not being taken seriously. I had people say that I was using my disability as a gimmick to try to sell art. I've had people ask me if my paintings were finger paintings, just to insult me, you know, and pushing through all of that alone, and experiencing these same things with Project Onward behind me, being able to talk to Kathy, to talk to the other caseworkers and social workers at Thresholds, it really gives you more confidence and more strength to push through and follow these dreams that you have. Because I've dreamed of being able to tell my story to people, being able to have my art in an exhibition, and being able to just, be seen and be heard. And having this opportunity, it's changed my life, and I hope that I can pay that forward and help to change the life of other people who experience the same thing as me. So, thank you.
So I think we're done. Cherylle, good job. Thanks for closing. No, just kidding. Excellent. No, really, thank you for that insight. That was spot on. And yeah, I look forward to delving a little deeper with you. And it's such a pleasure to meet you for the first time as well. Last but not least, we're gonna, I'm processing so much. I have like 4 times the questions that I started with. Mary Trent is a specialist in American and African American art and visual culture. She teaches courses in American art, African American art, and the history of photography. Her research focuses on issues of identity in visual culture, including ways marginalized figures have used art and media to critique dominant visual norms and better visualize their own experiences. She has an interest in how individuals from diverse backgrounds have used domestic vernacular album making practices to gain agency in the visualization of themselves and their worlds. Currently, Mary is an assistant professor of art and architectural history at the College of Charleston. Welcome, Mary.
Hi, good morning. Thanks to all the organizers and supporters of this event, as well as my fellow panelists. This is really exciting to be a part of the conversation. So I don't know most of you in this room. I work as an art historian, and so my career has been focused more on historicizing work by artists, American artists, including some artists with disabilities, and really illuminating why that work matters historically in the art world. So I teach students and publish my own research about how to interpret what historical art can tell us about the past and its resonance with continuing issues today. And I work in the South at the College of Charleston. You can see the beautiful campus that I work at with its Spanish moss. But I went to college here in Chicago, and I only, let's see, I spent 4 years at the University of Chicago studying art history, and I never learned about a single self-taught artist or an artist who was identified as having disabilities during my time there as an undergraduate. I only learned about the artist Henry Darger, who I'm sure many of you in this room are familiar with, a Chicago self-taught artist, right before I left Chicago, and it was an artist friend who told me about Darger. And I just completely fell in love with this artwork. I was interested in issues of gender and how mass media fixes social norms, and was completely blown over by how this artist's work disturbed the ubiquitous mid-20th century stereotypical images of girlhood into scenes that revealed how corrupt societies often use this passive ideal white feminine stereotype as victims for hypermasculine violence, as victims as fodder for hypermasculine violence, and how girlish figures could fight back precisely by becoming less feminine and more androgynous. Darger's own heroism as a man who is marginalized in so many ways, poor, the son of an immigrant, formerly institutionalized for feeble-mindedness, yet still inextinguishably resistant for decades through visual and written creativity, was very inspiring for me. Finding out that Nathan and Kyoko Lerner and institutions like Intuit and the American Folk Art Museum had not only preserved his art after his death, but his extensive source materials was even more thrilling. There's nothing like a well-preserved art archive to make an art historian's heart sing. So when I moved across the country to Southern California and embarked upon my PhD studies far away from Darger's former home and the archives in Chicago and New York, I nevertheless devoted my work to his art. My primary advisor, the Americanist Cecile Whiting, fully supported this endeavor, even though outsider and self-taught art was not a big area in academic art historical scholarship. Yet I did have a professor, a specialist in modern and contemporary art, even, who was less thrilled and basically told me I'd never get a tenure-track job with that dissertation topic. And as surprising as that was for me to hear, he wasn't entirely wrong, as I came to learn. Art history departments, their standard curriculum does not include courses in self-taught art or folk art. So if that's your specialty, it's a lot less marketable than, you know, a modern art historian or an American art historian. But I still studied Darger for my dissertation with the support of my advisor. I did pair him with the more canonical, yet still quirky, American surrealist, Joseph Cornell, and completed my dissertation on these two artists and issues of gender, masculinity, and girlhood in their work. Since then, I have come across other instances where it seemed that art historians in general just weren't fully comfortable or didn't necessarily want to grapple with issues of disability and how disability intersects with topics like sexuality, race, or social class. That hasn't stopped me, however, from publishing 3 different pieces of scholarly research on Darger to distinct academic audiences. My first essay on Darger up there on the upper right in the American Art Journal, which is the premier journal of American art history published by the Smithsonian. So sending Darger out to kind of more traditional American art historians. Also a book on masculinity and disability, so sending Darger out to more disability studies scholars who may not normally think about visual art at all. And then the most recent publication on the left, which is a book that I co-edited that just came out this summer on diverse stories and photographic albums, where I basically reread Darger's art, which was originally bound in these oversized albums, as a riff on the traditional family photograph album. And if you're curious about reading academic scholarship on Henry Darger, these are all available for free on my academia.edu page for download. And so that one on the left brings Darger's works more to photo historians. So there is a strong relevance for work, for academic scholarship on work by artists with disabilities across the humanities. That work just needs to be done. So I would just say generally, I think art historians are really still learning how to recognize the value of art made by artists identified as having a disability. Of course, there have been plenty of artists in history who have had disabilities of one form or another, but that hasn't always been a part of the discussion. But disability is such an important topic to consider when we are historicizing artwork. But it is very much still emerging, and I'll just throw out some, very non-scientific statistics that I just ran this week when preparing this talk. If you go to WorldCat, which is the premier search engine for finding academic writings, and you throw in some terms, again, not super scientifically, but just throw out art history and gender, you come up with 8,705 results. You throw out art history and race, 6,005, art history and sexuality, 3,799, and art history and disability, you do get 1,326 results, so, articles in academic journals, books, et cetera. But that's a lot less than some of these other categories of identity that are studied in humanities-based scholarship and including in art history. And disability studies is a newer arena. It is more emerging within academia in general, and it is certainly still emerging as something that art historians are taking as seriously as they've taken some of these other identity categories. And of course, disability intersects with these other identity categories. So it can be useful in thinking through, the many ways that different people have experienced some kind of marginalization in society, and what their work can tell us about diverse histories through time. So my final slide, I'm actually going to just cut in the interest of time so we can have some good conversations, but it just throws out some general ideas about why I think there have been these stumbling blocks in art history for studying disability, and if that's of interest, then we can talk about that a little bit in the conversation. But thank you very much. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Mary. That's really a lot of thoughts along that in regards to academia and the art world. So we're here to discuss the art world, which it just reminds me. I remember when I was invited to do, I curated, why I'm here just briefly and shortly, is I curated a show for the, what was it? Was it what anniversary? Was it 30th? 25th anniversary revisiting Black folk art in America. And I remembered when I was approached, I didn't know what a Black folk artist was or outsider artist was, because at the Southside Community Arts Center, they were just artists. And it was based on predominantly being African American, which you've worked with many African American artists have come through these spaces as well, but that's not the lens that we kind of approach them. So I just, I always felt like I knew the least amount in the room. And the more I told everyone, I really don't know anything about this subject matter, they're like, that's perfect. Like, it's like, no. So like my show text was really a thesis of me learning along the way. And everyone was like, you really picked the wrong artwork for this show. That's not a good choice. I said, it isn't. I said, okay, well, why don't you come and tell me? So I always felt a little like a fish out of water. But in the academic space, it's interesting, like if you're not writing about it, then it kind of like doesn't exist. And you know what I mean? Like it's really like how it lives. So we're gonna jump in with a couple questions. I'm gonna steal back my lone pink iPad that Deb has loaned to me, so that I can make sure out there in the Zoomiverse, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in. We are now in the future. Here we go. We'll go put them in a Q&A, excuse me, I'm sorry. And we'll move back and forth. But I'm gonna start with my first question, just once again, as someone who was coming into quote unquote outsider art, folk art, immediately I was thrusted into, and then working with Project Onward as a parent of 2 children with autism, terminology. And it seems like, it's something oftentimes people kind of talk around. Oh, thank you. People talk around without addressing directly. And I often say, hey, just tell me if I'm saying something. It's like, tell me how to say it so I, moving forward, won't. I can't know until I know. So my question is, how do we navigate terminology, language regarding artists being identified or self-identifying, i.e. special needs? I've heard a couple different terms today: special artist, disabled, abled, neurodivergent. And then kind of as a caveat to that, are labels limiting or are they helpful? And I think it might be nice each of us has a different kind of relationship to the topic we're discussing, which I really appreciate the diversity of that. And Cherylle, I pulled some of those terms that you just put right out there as well. So maybe just go down the line, just really quick, starting with Mary, to talk a little bit about how in academia you kind of navigate that as well.
Yeah, that's such a great question, because I do think thinking about terms is really important, and it should be intentional. In scholarship, kind of like I mentioned, there, there are many artists who have had disabilities. The question is often whether or not that's addressed, and there can be reasons both to identify and not to identify. And so I think just, when someone is writing about an artist with a disability as an art historian, because we're always writing about other people, just being very intentional about why you're talking about disability. And I think for art historians, it's the significance is always about tying the significance of the art to the broader social history. So when you're identifying somebody with a disability, that is part of their biography, but it's more than that, so it's also situating the circumstances in their life and how their disability has impacted their life within the broader structure, right? So that, like with my work on Darger, there had been a fair amount of work that was really just looking at his own psychology and reading the disability, like it all just occurred inside him. And I thought it was a lot more interesting to think about, well, why was he labeled certain ways, like terms we don't even use anymore, like feeble-minded? Mm-hmm. What does that tell us about the history at the time? And that period's idea of what disability is, and then how did he create his own responses to that through the artwork? So yeah, I think you just have to be really intentional about terms, recognize that they always say as much about the society as they do about the person who they're being applied to, and just be very thoughtful about what you're trying to say with the use of the terms.
Okay. Cherylle, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Mary, just about being intentional and really thinking about your why in when you talk about an artist's disability, because I've experienced at times where it just seems like somebody is just like throwing that out there in a way like this is a gimmick, like
Yeah, the gimmick comment really stuck out. Like it's almost like oh, you're getting an advantage.
Yeah.
By talking about something that you live.
Yeah, and it's like I have to live like this every
Right.
day.
Right.
And it can be difficult for me. I'm sure it can be a little annoying for people around me sometimes, but when it's brought as a way of describing my artwork or saying where it's coming from, I'm totally fine with that. I just don't really like it when it just seems like there's no point in you talking about the disability, like if it's just thrown in with no purpose.
I get it.
And without intention.
I get it. That's right. Yes. Robyn, you also work in a space with a broad spectrum of people with different sets of challenges.
Yeah. So going along with what Cherylle is saying, I think it's important to state that, the way that we look at our artists first. But it's, this is a greater debate. Like, okay, so some artists want to be known with their disability and some don't. And I think that is up to them. But I do think that it is an important, and it is a choice, but it is an important part of what we do at Project Onward, because we want to show that this work, and I think part of it is therapeutic, and that's a good part of it, but that's not the whole of these artists. They have amazing talents in composition and technique, and I think that's such an important part of what they do. The therapeutic part is important, but it's just a part of a whole. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Leslie, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm in a much smaller organization. It's just me and a handful of other artists who I work with. And we're nested in a social service organization that is dedicated to working with people who have mental health and substance abuse challenges. So it's already built into our community. Everyone who is there has similarities in the challenges that they are facing, and mostly we are within the studio. So there isn't as many opportunities for public identifying in the role that I have. But what I would say is I'm always interested in the individual, and that's just kind of how I comport myself in all life. It's like, what do you want?
Right.
What's important to you and how you name yourself, which is, I think, as Robyn said, Artist First is why Scott Hunter, who curated the exhibition downstairs, and I landed on the name Artist First, that in all the different ways that the folks who I work with can be identified, the one that we all share is we want to be artists. That's how, look at me and see me as an artist. So that's a generalization speaking in terms of the exhibition and my experience with the folks who come to the studio. But I'm hoping if we have more and more, as I said, public-facing opportunities, it will be a conversation with each person about what they want.
Yeah. I learned a lot, once again, going back to the show. Not necessarily the artist that you're working with specifically, but I remember Lonnie Holly was a really important person in that show for me. And this debate is an outsider, folk, sound, installation, sculptor. And there's all these conversations about, no, it's that type of artist, or that type of artist, or that type of artist, or this type of artist. And what I realized at the end is like, no, they're all, we're diverse. We wear a lot of hats like we wear a lot of hats like our dear friend Deb, right? And it's about, I think in some sort of way about self-identifying. And as a professor at UIC, I have, I can look in a room and like, boom, like I need, it's like I have children, they're just things I pick up on. I'm very sensitive, but it's about self-identifying. Many students come in, I don't want that label right now. I don't want that thing. And you can put that on when you want it. I encourage, use the resources you have. I mean, any artist knows, like, it's about networking, it's about resources, exhibition opportunities. So there's some resources, use those, and Cherylle has really talked well about that, about tapping into the resources that are available and not the shame of having those resources. But it's, not everyone's ready until they're ready,
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's something that held me back, that shame that you talked about. I feel like when people find out that you have a mental illness especially, but any kind of disability, they're either afraid or they're either going to infantilize you. They may try to take advantage of you. So a lot of people, including myself in the past, just want to hide that, and you do a lot of masking. You can really burn yourself out by just trying to pretend like your disability or your illness doesn't exist. And in a way, we're all the same. We have different challenges, but we're all human beings. We have the same, pretty much the same functions. But just saying, I'm like everyone else. But to thrive as an artist, you can't be like everyone.
That's right. Exactly.
So you kind of have to just accept it and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I have to deal with.
Right.
This is where I find my inspiration. Take it or leave it, I guess.
Exactly.
I also think
Yes,
that
let's give a hand to that.
to
That's yes, please.
the advocacy that goes along with trying to break through that stigma, that it is such a big part of being an artist in any realm. You want to be an advocate, and I think being an advocate for yourself, which Cherylle is a wonderful artist that does that for herself, and our organizations try to do. I think if there's that advocacy and that good intention there, that's all that really matters.
Yeah, I want to
Please.
underline and reinforce that. I completely stand by my whatever the artist wants to identify as, but the way we deal and take stigma out of the closet is by making it normal. This is not an issue.
That's right.
And we have to name a thing to make it okay. And so, yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It's like a person needs to feel comfortable and identify as they want to, but when people talk about stuff and when we see, oh, that person really? And then there's no really, it's just,
Right.
oh, sure, that's just how life is. We all have our challenges. It deflates the shame and it deflates the stigma. And it's hard work, it's painful work, but I agree, it's a really important,
Very true.
yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of answered. I had a question for Robyn and Leslie about something that you said: the fine line of support versus education, and thinking about your roles. Because I also found that to be a thing that I discovered too, and thinking about one of my speculations was the notion of outsider or outside of the art world was really the places I thought people were looking were into special needs arts communities as well as prison populations as well. These are the spaces, I mean, because you can't be outside, it's like everybody got a phone, like how, as well. And this notion of like, there's always like guiding, like education, like make it this way or make it that way. And I know, so hearing you talk about the resource aspect, letting artists be artists, it's not about training artists to be artists. It's about giving them space to be artists, which is...
But that's also giving artists the capacity to grow.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's a difference between training and expanding.
Yeah, totally. It's a fine line. Okay, let's, we got a couple of questions. I'm gonna jump back and forth because I got a lot of questions, so keep them coming. Robyn, let's do this. Here's a question. How do you see artists with or without disabilities being integrated into a larger art community? And what else can be done? That's a kind of a little bit of a thesis of the exhibition. I'm going to expand because I'm going to merge that with my question. So that's a great question. What is the art world? Like, once again, just like what is folk art? I'm like, like art world? And Leslie did a great job of like giving some let me see, because I wrote it, where was it? Oh, let me go back to my question because I added some things. Yeah, so I'll just ask questions. What are some of the challenges, hurdles involved with supporting your work? And how are artists and their work situated in the art world? Pretty much the same question. And then I was like, what are art world? Like, what is the art world, this art world thing? And then you mentioned things like gatherings. You talked about like taking space, being taken seriously. I mean, if I'm a plumber, I also want to be taken seriously. You know what I mean? It's like, I want you to respect my, what I do. So I'm just curious if y'all can kind of, as an academic, as an artist, as people who support and are part of the art world, can maybe y'all like expand on that a little bit in your various ways? Maybe start down on the end again.
So for me, my art world, as a not artist, as an art historian and an educator, is what gets taught in the classes. So what's part of like the canon, to the extent that there is still a set of works that gets taught as like the important artworks you're supposed to know about, and the stories of our collective artistic history, right? That's what we do as art historians. And what I have seen in the academy is fine art professors are usually much more inclusive of artists who are identified as having disabilities when they're giving examples or art history talks within their studio art classes. And I do think art historians, which are often a separate department, are still getting there. It's definitely still emerging. So I think really making room for artists with disabilities in art history is just acknowledging that artists with disabilities are a part of the conversation, even if they're not always there are plenty of artists who have had disabilities, but they're just not always talked about that way. And that part of our collective story as how we express ourselves visually includes really interesting work and should include really interesting work by people who have disabilities. And disabilities should be a part of the conversation because it shouldn't be shameful, right? That's a part of all of our experiences. So at some point in our life, all of us are gonna have some kind of a disability, right? Even if it doesn't happen until towards the end of our life. So that's for me what making it part of the art world would be having more of the conversations within art history classrooms. So it's just standard, not kind of exceptional.
Excellent. Sure.
I think some of the challenges,
Well, how do you like? So to be more specific about, and I know you talked about maybe one of your primary. Like, I think a lot of artists, depending on the lens that they're looking at, like gauge success as an artist by how much they sell, and that's fine. You clearly stated that that's not necessarily always a priority for you. So for you specifically, in regards to goals, like when you hear this word art world, like how does your practice of things, your goals connect to that notion? Like, what is the art world?
I guess just being able to connect to as many people as possible, and for, as many people as possible to see my artwork. Okay. Like if it can help people or inspire people, okay. I want that. And I do want the sales also.
Yes.
That's not,
So
it's not the most
if you remember,
important
Cheryle's taking commissions. we said that. I said it very specific. I got your back.
I'll tell you where to contact us.
But I think it's most important to have that freedom and that open space to be able to create. And, the sales are important because if you're broke and you're upset because you don't know how you're going to pay your bills, it's hard to make art. It's hard to be inspired under those circumstances. And it just means being able to get to shows. Transportation can be an issue sometimes, like just knowing that I can be in places like this, or yes. Getting to the studio at Project Onward often, so that I can just be in there and not have like a specific focus, like I need to make this piece so it can sell and I can make $500 or something of that nature, but just saying, this is what I feel inspired by. I want to explore this. I want to experiment with this, and seeing what happens.
Excellent.
I think going to Cherylle's point of having that opportunity to make without having to have the pressure of having an immediate sale is important, and it's important for Project Onward to, sales are important, however, guiding that artist to be able to, I think sharing is the most important part of connecting in the art world, and that's what we try to do. Especially for our artists who have disabilities or a mental illness, that is their way of connecting with the world. And the stakes are sometimes a little bit higher, not always, but they're sometimes a little bit higher for artists with these disabilities because that's how they connect, is visually. And I think to the other point of how does disability art or outsider art or whatever these terms are have their place in the art world, it is in the art world. It is just being a little bit more talked about now, which has needed to happen for a while. And that is my job, and that's crucial to our organization, I think, to make our mission happen.
Excellent.
I agree with all of these reflections. I think I'm thinking about it, I'm realizing I'm really centering it in my own experience as an artist. And then I'm taking that, because we all kind of use the lens of our own experience to understand other people's experience, even though the gulf is massive. That's how else can we comport ourselves, right? So I think of like being in the studio as it's making the work, right? It's being in that state of whatever that is that makes you make work, but that is not the art world. Making work is not the art world, my experience.
Yes. No.
And if the art world encroaches in making the work,
Be careful what you ask
there
for.
can be some problems. So then what is the art world? I think the art world is sharing. It is communication. It is connection. It is public facing.
Yep.
It is being relevant. It is being recorded, so it's history. It is occupying space. It is being seen. And there's many audiences and platforms for that to happen. And now in our world, it can be virtual. It can be digital. It can be on social media. It can be in journals. It can be in rooms like this and in galleries. And of course, people with disabilities fit in every single one of those spaces.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Can I say one more thing?
Please.
So I think that is also one of our biggest challenges in a way, because it is like you say, it is the art world and it isn't, but like that is, as my job is to change that, I think, and I think we are getting somewhere with that, but I think one of our biggest challenges at Project Onward is that, we'll have customers or clients come into us sometimes and say, so what's wrong with them? What's their disability? Or they'll question us on our sales, like, why is this,
Right.
$100, or why is this $500? And those are the kind of questions that we still get that sometimes you don't get at regular or neurotypical galleries, and that's a big challenge for us. And the other challenge that we face, not really having to do with that, is that we really, our roles, like you said, with many hats, are different. Like, we're artists first, the people that work there, and we have some background with in training with disability and mental illness, but we are not therapists, and we are not social workers, and that's, I think, our biggest challenge, is on a greater level for people with disabilities, not just in art, is that there's not enough services out there, or there's not enough resources to get those services. So I think that's our biggest challenge right now.
Wow. Robyn, you put me into a weird position, because that was one of my questions. But
sorry.
I have questions I got to get to on the computer, so we're going to have to come back to that. I'm going to merge another one specifically from Charles Thorpe. Well, it actually connects a little bit to what you're saying. In social services, it appears that there's a standard to delineate people into deserving or undeserving of support, i.e. means testing, drug testing, having an address or not. How do the concepts of deserving and undeserving play out, and who gets access and amplification in the art world? I'm gonna connect that with another question, because someone, I think, Sue, asked about, well, two people in various ways asked about how, specifically Robyn and Leslie, how do people get involved in your organizations, right? And then there's also a mention of the residency, and I think they're referring to the Kohler residency in a way. So once again, maybe kind of like mixing those a little together around keeping people in, keeping people out. How do people get into your worlds in some sort of way, I guess?
Well, I feel like a fake Threshold employee right now because I can't answer this question.
Right.
So I did come in for the first 15 years. I've been at Thresholds for 25 as a not Threshold employee, brought on by Kyoko Lerner. I'm not a caseworker. I'm not an art therapist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a social worker. I'm none of these things. So I don't know what our intake process is. We have an intake process, but I can't speak to it. But it would
How would someone find out?
I would assume on the website. Thresholds is a website, and it has lots of great resources on it. And you could also probably call and get a hold of someone as well. So I apologize for not having a concrete answer for that. But we are a very wonderful organization that supports many, 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 many people. And so those resources are available and extensive through the state of Illinois and Chicago. In terms of my own studio, usually staff bring members, which is our terminology for folks who participate and receive services, who they've noticed are creative or makers in. So I often get referrals through Thresholds to my studio.
And someone put it right in the chat.
Thank
so
you.
for those online, look
you.
at that. Johnny on the spot. Robyn?
Okay, so first of all, for artists, there is an application on our website, and we also do get a lot of our artists through art therapy recommendations and after school matters for kids who are aging out of the program. Randy, our art therapy consultant, has brought quite a few artists to us, as well as Kathy Osler. Both of them have been awesome in bringing us their best artists. So I think part of what makes our artists, you know, a fit for our program is the vision that they have. And if we see a clear vision in what they do, then, and if they fit with the other artists around them, because those are, you know, those artists are extremely important and that they're comfortable with us as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then if you want to volunteer, you can go to the website, and there's also a
Yes.
application on there as well.
Yes, and they also put the website in the chat once again. I'm going to ask a specific question to Cherylle. Number one, someone said, congrats on your Virginia Groot Foundation funding to give Cherylle space to do her work. And number two, in Robyn's slideshow where she showed some of Cherylle's work, there was a red mask that looked like it might be about COVID. Was it? And if so, can you say something about the story it tells?
Yes, that mask actually was about COVID. I did it probably about halfway through the lockdowns, and it was about the fear that we had of COVID. Everything was uncertain. We didn't have any vaccines. They didn't really know how they were going to treat it. And, you know, people went kind of insane for a little while. I mean, the whole toilet paper thing was just crazy and unnecessary, you know, like, and we were all so, we were terrified, you know, and I thought that using this mask to personify that fear of COVID that we had, and even the fear of each other that we had. You know, like during that time, like if you saw somebody without a mask on, you're like, oh my God, what are you doing, man? Like, like people were just freaked out by each other in a way that I've never seen in my life. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, this COVID disease is the monster that everybody's afraid of, you know, and I tried to create that monster with the mask.
Excellent. Thank you. We're nearing the end, but I want to end on a little bit of an uplift. Number one, I just wanted to say Kyoko Lerner.
Yes.
Nathan Lerner.
Yes.
Was a student at IIT.
Yes.
And was on the commission to actually build the interior of the Southside Community Arts Center. So
Yes.
for years, I would talk about Nathan Lerner.
Yes.
I work with Jan Tichy a lot, and he's also working with Kyoko. I haven't met her yet, but I'm looking forward to that as well, and exploring that further in my practice, which is about Southside Community Arts Center. So we share that in common a little bit. There's a thread there. Anyway. I'm sorry, that's a little bit of we'll have a sidebar.
Yes. Sidebar.
But I want to end a little bit on some horizon conversations. So we can go down the list. What are the current and future possibilities for working in and within these communities? And beyond that, what's on the horizon of your work and your organization or your research or art practice? And what are you excited or hopeful about? So you can take any part of that. There's a little bit of an opportunity to plug yourself.
Well, I'll speak more generally. I have noticed since, I was told, 20 years ago that I couldn't get a job by writing about a self-taught artist, that there are a lot more projects, people who are writing dissertations about artists who are self-taught, and that they're getting funding, dissertation funding through like the Henry Luce Foundation and other sources. So yeah, I think especially within American art, there is a growing set of work. There's more work being done on artists who are self-taught and who have disabilities, and work that's looking at intersections between issues like race and gender and sexuality and disability.
What you got coming? Got big plans.
Yeah,
I got plans
I'm really
for Cherylle.
excited about the ceramic center that we're getting started. I want to work on some artwork that really explores the experience of having a mental illness, the experience of masking, because for me, it was something that I just did. Like I felt like I had to do. It became my normal, and it was exhausting to try to pretend to be neurotypical and not have a mental illness when internally you do. And I think that's a really important conversation, and I want to try to get that going.
I wrote down hiding in plain sight is when you were talking earlier, and that's that's exciting to explore. Robyn, what you got? So how long you got? I got all these things going on.
Oh, yeah, I'm just trying to number them in my head. So I'm also excited to be working with Cherylle on growing the ceramics program. I am not a ceramics artist, but I'm hoping to learn a lot more about it and hopefully take Cherylle's work further out. I know there's a show in New York called Super Rough that's a goal for Cherylle with working with me together for her to bring her work further out into the world. And then we're also going to be starting a fiber arts program in our studio in the next 6 months. So I'm really excited for that, and a small digital arts as well. So just to expand upon the different mediums that we do have at hand, and I really want to integrate them into each artist so that they have those opportunities as well. And then, wait, there was another part of the question. What was it again?
No, I mean, just optimism, just things coming down the line. It was just,
Also, we are going to be working, we're going to have us be working with Intuit with the show with Tarek Eccles. So we will be kind of connecting to that artist a little bit, which is a nice collaboration. So thank you for that. And then hoping to just go out into different places and continue to grow our scope of
excellent
connecting our artists to the world.
As a sidebar, just before we get to Leslie, there was a question. You said it, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. I wasn't, because we're running out of time here. But from Terrence, what do you think about digital and NFTs? Is this something that has come, well, just you specifically. Is this something, I imagine, has come through the door?
Yes, we actually have done that. We worked with Lisa Slominski, who is she just wrote a book too. The name escapes me right now, but she wrote a book on artists outside the neurotypical realm, and so she wanted to do the first NFTs with Project Onward artists, and her husband is actually a digital artist, so we were lucky enough to try that out, and actually a few of our artists did quite well. Ruby Bradford, Super Cat, sold over 10,000 NFTs.
I was going to wear my necklace today. I forgot it at home from Ruby.
We'll have to talk about Ruby in depth.
Yeah, she's great.
She has a lot of things on the horizon as
She's on the
always.
horizon.
So it was a good experience. I don't know that it's completely lucrative for everyone in the future in our program. I mean, if the opportunity arises and it's a good fit for the artists, we may do it again. But overall, it was a pretty good experience.
Thank you. Leslie.
Well, the most exciting thing is the site where I work, Threshold South, is getting an addition. We're a very old building. An art studio has historically been in the basement of this very old building, a basement that is the least COVID-friendly space that ever existed. And so we got booted out of that space, and we're kind of without a studio. And so there is a new building under construction, which will have a dedicated art studio. Yay is right. So we're very, 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 there can't be enough varies for the level of excitement about that. And then a slightly more current situation that I'm thrilled about is there's going to be a small book that's going to come out featuring some of the artists who are in the Artists First exhibition, which is very close to being done and will be for sale at Buddy. And it is being made by Hat and Beards Press's non-for-profit arm called Invisible Republic. So if you're interested in finding that, you can look up Invisible Republic. I don't know if it's .com or .org, but Hat and Beard Press for sure will take you there, and hopefully within a month or two at the latest. And it's called Henry's Legacy.
Oh, wow.
After Henry Darger.
Right, excellent. We have a couple of questions that I wasn't able to all the way get to. So for those online, I apologize, the limitations. And then also I have one here that what I'm going to actually ask, this is a little more of a personal nature, that whoever this person is, maybe come up afterwards and we can talk about this and maybe point into some resources as well, or talk to some of our panelists individually about it, a little bit about trust. So in that trusting manner, I'm going to keep it trustful and come up. But I just want to can we thank all of our panelists who are wonderful, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface of such a broad topic. So thank you for scratching with me on stage. And I'm gonna turn it over to Deb.
Thanks, Faheem. Thank you all for joining us for this fascinating session. I appreciate all of you for coming out and being here and bringing your full selves. As we said, please visit the Artists First exhibition on view here at the Cultural Center in the Michigan Avenue Galleries on the first floor on the east side of the building. And Buddy is the store that's right around the corner that has beautiful objects made by artists from all over the Chicagoland area, and you can get something wonderful there for the holiday season. For those of you on site, we have this space in this room until 1:30. So please do feel free to come up and have those trustful conversations in person. Intuit opened an exhibition yesterday. Tariq Eccles opened the first solo show for Mr. Eccles, an artist who's been making work for the past 15 years at the Little City Studio in Palatine, Illinois. This is an exhibition we've been wanting to do for a number of years, and we're just thrilled to have that open. The exhibition is going to be accompanied by 3 rotating exhibitions featuring works by artists from 3 different studios, currently Creative Growth in Oakland, and followed by Project Onward, and followed by Arts of Life. All 3 of these studios were featured as part of this symposium series. So when you can, please stop by Intuit at Milwaukee and Chicago, or check out the work on our website, www.art.org. Thank you so much for being here. And if you're online, if you're in person and you did not get your questions answered, you can shoot a note to intuit@art.org, and we can connect you with any of our speakers and create a dialogue for you. So thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you all.